This week, Kumar and I discuss volumes 11 and 12 of Kentaro Miura's Berserk. As usual, sometimes Miura's excesses make us roll our eyes, but other times they totally floor us. These volumes give us that in spades as we reach the climax of the very long flashback sequence. By the way, don't forget we now have a voicemail. To leave us a message, click the Leave a Voicemail link on the sidebar at deconstructingcomics.com. This is Tim.
And this is Kumar.
And this is Deconstructing Comics. Welcome to Deconstructing Comics. This is Tim in Tokyo with Kumar in Melbourne. Greetings.
Hello.
And we're back with more Berserk, volumes 11 and 12. And boy, these two volumes are pretty upsetting in various ways.
Yes and no. I think they're all over the place again, but we can talk about that. I actually was kind of thinking that as I started to read them, I was like, I'm going to have a lot less to say these volumes because there's a lot of like long fight sequences, 50, 60, 70 pages. But then there's like a really dense plot that is kind of hard to untangle in between those sequences. So I don't really know. I'm curious as to how this is going to go.
Yeah, I was imagining, boy, can we get this done in an hour? Or should we do a volume at a time?
I did re-listen to our last episode, and it was 75 or so. So I think I think it'll be enough.
So it was upsetting, but at the same time, when I finished 12, it was all I could do not to move on to volume 13. So
yeah.
So I might be reading it like today.
Okay. Well, that's not a bad idea because you got ahead when we were reading the first volumes. I think you went up to 4 or 5 or something.
I did. I read further ahead than we covered in our first Berserk episode.
And I did feel like this time I didn't reread them. I never reread them, but I do go back through them, and I did this time. But I did feel like, maybe I should do a full reread this time, but I didn't have time. But something that I also noticed, and it comes up in a lot of comics in different ways, is sometimes if it's a serialized comic, it's better to read it in serialization because, like last time we talked about the relationship between Guts and Griffiths and how it did not feel deep enough for the weight that Miura was saying that it was deep. He was saying this is a really deep relationship, and I was like, I don't get it. I don't think it is. But I bet if you'd been reading it over 10 months instead of an hour, it would feel a lot different, like those 10 chapters. And you might get a sense that you were in there experiencing almost at the same time, or something like that. I'm not really sure, but that did kind of hit me. And then reading these volumes today, or yesterday, or over the weekend, I did feel like, I should be spreading this out instead of like just consuming it over a single weekend, even though the time frame, there's no 1 year jump in these two volumes like we had last time.
Right.
It's all over maybe a day.
Yeah, it's a very short amount of time.
Yeah. So that kind of maybe affects the experience too, but anyway, we can maybe come back to all that if it comes up again.
Okay. So when we left off, we had just met Wild, W-Y-A-L-D, who is the leader of the Black Dogs, criminals who are commissioned by the king to take out the Band of the Hawk, and especially Griffith.
Yeah.
And we start with the king sitting on his throne, thinking about how he's been so horrible to his daughter Charlotte and all, but it's all Griffith's fault. Not, the king has he's blameless. It's all because of Griffith. Yeah. Griffith stole Charlotte from him, and so he ended up doing these things to Charlotte, and it's Griffith's fault. So, gotta wipe him out.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't quite get to his, what is, he's an interesting character. I mean, he's crying in these opening pages. But he doesn't seem to have any regret about his treatment of her, like his attempted rape of her, his sexual assault.
Well, it's like it's so it's too bad that Griffith made it necessary for me to do that, or he pushed me into doing
Griffith
this.
Griffith put the idea in his head.
Yeah.
But he doesn't really talk about that aspect of it. It's just like Griffith's to blame. Your words which stole Charlotte away, he says.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess he feels that she's not a dutiful daughter, or she has no love for him anymore because of Griffith, not because of his own actions.
Right.
Anyway.
We get a flashback to a prison yard fight in which Wilde killed his opponent seemingly using magic.
Yeah, so this is important because Wilde is, I don't think he's magic necessarily, but Wilde and all these people are, and his band, the band of the Wild Dogs?
The Black Dogs.
The Black Dogs. They are former convicts. They're, quote-unquote, able-bodied criminals. So that's the pool that these guys have been culled from. Mm-hmm. And so he has they have to decide the leader of this band of criminals that's going to fight on behalf of the king, I guess maybe as a form of a pardon. And he fights this guy called Barbo, the armor hacker, who has this weird shaped head, like deformed looking head. He actually looks a bit like a dolphin, but he calls him an octopus. Wilde calls him an octopus. Octopus is a kind of monkey-looking guy. We described him as a lion last time, but I think he's supposed to be more ape-like.
Wild, yeah.
Yeah, and so is this magic or not? He says to the king, I'm going to present you with the new statue on top of that tower. And Barbo takes one swing at Wilde, and suddenly, I don't know, there's a strange page where Wilde is staring at Barbo. Barbo's one eye goes wide open, and all these crows like flutter into the sky, and then we see his corpse impaled on the top of this spire on top of the tower. And it was like, well, how did he get up there? Like you said, it's magic. Wilde's hands are bound.
Right, yeah, he's in this kind of like wooden handcuffs.
I assumed that this was a kind of like Fist of the North Star thing where Wilde is just so awesome that he moved so fast that he threw this guy, even with his hands shackled, he threw this guy up onto the tower and nobody could see it because it was so fast and awesome. But maybe it was magic.
Yeah, it's unclear. But
does anybody say, like, we get the reaction from the crowd, and it says, although it happened before our eyes, it seemed as if it had been unreal, like some tasteless joke or something. So it is real, but it seems as if it had been unreal. And then he says, as he declared, he completely seized the hearts of the convicts through a charisma of fear. So it's not like magic. It's just like his fearsome strength, like his fearsome martial arts ability. I guess. There's a lot of mysterious stuff in these 2 volumes. I should say 12 volumes. We're not really sure whether the thing that happened was supernatural or not, or how we're supposed to react to this. But, yeah. Oh, by the way, we're also told that the Black Dogs are equal to the Band of the Hawk. And that was a detail that I did not like because we've never heard of these guys before. I think their reputation would have somehow entered the series earlier if they were that good.
Well, and from what we see subsequently, other than Wilde, I don't think they are that good.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that might be correct also. Yeah.
They got a good PR agent, but I don't think they're backing it up.
Yeah.
So the Hawks, this subset of Hawks have been put up on this family farm, and they're leaving. And then Wilde and the Black Dogs show up asking whether the Hawks have been there. And then, just for grins, rape, kill, dismember the family.
Yeah.
Wilde enjoys that kind of thing. He says so.
Yes. Yeah, it's pretty graphic, but I thought it was really cartoonish and kind of too perfunctory at this stage, like 11 volumes in, because previously when we've had a serious, like a rape or a sex scene, it's been treated with an amount of weight, like some pages are given to it. It's treated with some seriousness. And here it's just like cartoon, it's happened so quickly, and I'm kind of getting sick of Miura drawing all these women with the same body type.
Well, yeah, that was throwing me too, because the female bodies are always so idealized, regardless of what kind of scene it is. I mean, if it's a consensual sex scene, that's different, but in this kind of scene that's supposed to be horrifying, at the same time, it's kind of erotic and like, what?
I think he's trying to be tittillating.
Well,
and
yeah.
We have to, and I think it comes up later with Casca ends up stripped nude by the bad guy, by Wild. Wild rips off her clothes. Yeah. And you get a shot of her. It's a fan service shot of her topless chest. And last episode, I defended the sex scenes. I defended the sex scenes, the two gratuitous sex scenes in those volumes, saying that they had narrative purpose, or that they showed that Guts and Casca were vulnerable in that moment. Mm-hmm. But in this case, it's not the case. It doesn't really show Casca as being vulnerable. I mean, she's the only one that's nude in the scene. And he's ripped off her underwear in the perfect way so that her pubic hair is covered, but her butt shows whenever she turns around, very conveniently. Mm-hmm. So it was slightly annoying, and this Wild raping all these women that look exactly the same was also kind of annoying to me. And he's just kind of too ridiculous of a character. I mean, we had all those JoJo enemies in the last volume, mm-hmm. But this guy, he's just so like hilariously evil. Like he's so obsessed with combat and murder and raping and all that kind of stuff. It's just it was hard for me to take any of this stuff seriously. And when you emailed me and you said, "Oh, these volumes are really full on," before I had read them, I was like, I wonder what scenes he means. And I wondered if this was one of them. And after reading, I was like, no, I couldn't have been, because it just kind of flies by in this. Well,
that's true. It was more like after that, the dismemberment, and then running around with the body parts on their spears as they're approaching the hawks.
Yeah, but even that, to me, that was like, well, we're going too far with this. It's too clownish somehow to me. I mean, I like some of the horror stuff later, especially in Volume 12. There's some real, like, that kind of Clive Barker-ish H.R. Giger stuff that we saw in the first couple of volumes comes back, and I like that as a form of horror. But to put a, like, decapitated, dismembered corpse on a stake and use that as like a blunt weapon, like a mace, and I don't know what to make it. Maybe I've become desensitized after 10 volumes of stuff that it didn't really shock me. I'm not sure. Maybe I should have reread it. Yeah, well, we'll flip through these pages again, and then I'll make a decision about it, I guess.
Well, and I noticed something about these two volumes that I'm going to talk about later.
Okay.
So the Hawks see the dogs coming up behind them. Guts and Pippin fight them while the others try to outrun them in the wagon, and they're trying to get to this bridge so they can blow it up when the dogs get there.
Slightly before we get there, I want to talk about the cover page to Chapter 2, Devil Dogs Chapter 2, which is around page 29, which has all the black dogs riding in with those corpses on sticks, almost as banners. There's a guy in the background who has a woman's like waist and legs, almost like a wishbone, and he's holding them up in the air. Like, I don't know, what is he doing? What's the point of that?
I don't know.
I don't know. Maybe these bodies are supposed to scare the enemy. I guess maybe instead of actually be weapons, although they are used as weapons later. But maybe they're just supposed to frighten the enemy, because I don't see any other reason for this guy to be holding these wishbone-type legs. Like, there's just the waist and the leg. It's so strange, but it's almost comical, the look on his face, the look of glee on this guy's face as well.
Guts notices that no matter how many of them they kill, the dogs don't back off, and he sees in their eyes they're motivated by fear of Wild. It's that charisma of fear that was mentioned in that prison yard flashback.
Yeah. By the way, the panel where they see the bridge in the distance is excellent. I really love Miura's handling of like how he's able to manage these panel sizes, because it's not a full page splash. It's like a quarter of the page is in the bottom corner. It's on like page 31, and the bridge is way off there, tiny in the distance. But because they've mentioned that they're going to see the bridge soon, you know that that's a bridge. As few as the details are in this panel, it's really well handled. I really love the way he handles establishing shots like this.
Yeah, it's really clear. Sometimes his art, like in the fight scenes, I'm like, what's going on here? But this one is super clear.
Yeah.
So they rigged the bridge to explode. And Guts realizes his feelings at this moment are the same as when he encountered Zod and the skeleton general on horseback. I don't know the name of that character.
Yeah, we don't have that character's name.
Yeah, maybe not.
We had a suspicion last chapter that he was the king that had died, that had overtaxed his people, but we're not sure.
Right.
That hasn't been clarified. And we know that king's name, but I don't remember it at the moment.
Right. But I also noticed, especially as I was researching the names of the Godhead members, Miura very seldom gives out the names of the characters. Like, you can go pages and pages and pages without, you have to go, like, flip back to the previous volume and search through it to find a character's name. He needs to remind us. I wonder when this was serialized if there might have been like a recap page with character names on it.
Yeah, sometimes there aren't even recap pages, but they have a little recap in the margin of like the first page of like where the story's at. Like these characters are chasing these characters or something like that, which is there in serialization. Yes. Mm-hmm.
So there might have been in every Fullmetal Alchemist volume, there are pictures of some of the characters in the front with their names. Not everybody. There are too many characters.
I have seen, as a translator, I've seen manga authors cheat sometimes by naming a character in the margins in the recap that they did not name that character before. And that's where you see that character's name for the first time. Like, oops, I forgot to name them. I'll just put it in the little recap in the margin
This is George. Didn't you know that? It's George. Yeah. So they blow up the bridge, and a lot of the dogs die, and Wild is like, oh, well, it's too bad. He doesn't really
by the
care.
way, Wild, there's this one guy, one of his soldiers, one of the Black Dog soldiers, has this helmet with a kind of bump on it. And Wild squeezes the bump. This is on page 51. He squeezes the bump of like his helmet with two fingers, just squashes them together, and it causes the guy's eyeballs to pop out. Mm-hmm. And I didn't understand quite what the physics of this. Like, what is this thing on his helmet? Why does it have that big lump on the forehead of the helmet? I don't know what it is.
I don't know.
Yeah, but I guess it's supposed to demonstrate the strength that Wild has, even in just two fingers. He can just pinch this guy's forehead, his helmet. He can pinch the guy's helmet and squeeze his brains and eyeballs out.
And he does that because this guy is questioning whether their strategy is good. They're just like going right into the enemy's hands. And Wild's idea is if you start talking about living and dying, you end up wasting your life away, which, the point by itself might be a good one, but his twist on it is not to be emulated at all.
Yeah.
And Guts is wondering why only he and Griffith keep running into these supernatural enemies.
Yeah, but we know that's not true from volumes 9 and 10, because those people saw that big cobra monster out in the woods, and one of the hawk who got left behind, what was his name? He encountered that fairy creature in the woods, and then that giant thing that was ended up eating the rest of the crew. Mm-hmm. So these big monsters are appearing, but I don't think we get a clear explanation in these two volumes, of why that big cobra monster was out there in the woods, etc.
Well, it was implied that it had something to do with the Behelit, but didn't actually state.
That's not right. That's not right. we learn in this that it operates a little bit differently. I think. I'll give you my explanation. You can tell me if I'm wrong. When
Okay. But it seemed like when the Behelit got washed out out of the prison into nature, that then weird creatures started appearing.
That's what we assumed.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not the way the Behelit is explained in Volume 12.
Yeah.
I don't think.
Okay. So of course nothing can beat Wild. They drop rocks on the dogs, and he's like, "Oh, music to my ears," as his men are squashed.
This is the kind of thing that I'm like, okay, this is a bit too much. Music to my ears. And then he's fighting Guts with a log. Apparently, and then at one point he catches Guts' sword with his teeth.
Yeah.
And I mean, these are kind of amazing visuals. The idea of it is amazing, but it is really reaching a level of ridiculousness. But I guess he is kind of it's revealed later that he is definitely a supernatural creature. He's not just a weird guy that looks like a monkey, which is kind of the line that they've been skirting here. They've been suggesting that he is a guy, but he's like a beast, as they said last volume. He really is a monster, a supernatural monster, it's revealed. Mm-hmm. So maybe catching the sword with the teeth is not going too far,
Well, but yeah, as fight scenes go, I mean, Miura not only goes over the top, he goes over the top. So.
Yes, and I would also say that if you read him fighting using a log in one chapter, and then you waited a week, and then the next chapter you saw him catch a sword with his teeth, that would be different, maybe. Maybe your reaction would be more level, rather than have the two things happen 10 pages apart, and you're like, this is too much.
Yeah, it's once. The same chapter.
Yeah, or whatever. Yeah.
Oh, and he punches Guts' horse too.
Yes.
And we're getting hints dropped here, like when Wild says of the battle, "This was only meant to be a light snack, but I can't quit. I might just eat everything. I won't wait till the eclipse."
Yeah.
So, hint of what's coming up.
Yes, but what does that actually mean? Is he supposed to wait until the eclipse before he eats everything? Oh, I guess it does.
Well, I mean, there is a lot of eating at the eclipse.
Yes, that is right. Okay, yes. I see. Yes. Okay.
Yeah, it's not Schemy Baga either, but
yeah.
Okay, that's an in joke for people in Japan who know McDonald's, but anyway.
This fight, by the way, the log versus sword fight is, I don't know if I like the way it's depicted or I don't like it, but it's kind of crazy where you just get he's drawn all these swooping lines of the weapons slashing each other, but you just get like one panel and there'll be like 10 slashes in one panel. I'm looking at like page 80, 81, and there are a few panels like this where other people are watching the fight and you just see Guts and Wild and just all these streaks around them as the weapons are clashing. Mm-hmm. It's kind of a cool thing that they're like to show that they're evenly matched or they're really going at it.
Yeah. Oh, and we forgot to mention that they have met back up with the contingent of Hawks that left with them for the Griffith rescue mission.
Yeah, because last volume we weren't sure if they were all dead.
Yeah,
if they were all eaten by that creature or not, but there are.
Yeah, the rest of them are dead, and none of these people know that yet. If they ever find out, but that's a story for later. There were two groups, and then from this group, the small rescue party set out and left these guys at this location that they've now managed to get back to.
Yes, and they have set traps all along the road, which is part of how they're taking out the black dogs.
Oh, and Corcus is in this group. I was wondering last time if he had been one of the ones in the group that got destroyed last time, right. But no, he's here. So all of the named characters are currently still alive.
What about the one that met that fairy and monster in the woods that ate the rest of the troop? Who was that? That was a named character, I thought.
That was well. I mean, we see him coming up. The boy. Okay. I don't know his name. I've forgotten it, and of course Miura doesn't tell us. But I'd have to go flipping back to last time's volumes, maybe. But yeah, he's still alive.
Okay.
And I'm sure he has a name, but what is it?
So he escaped. He escaped somehow. I don't remember.
Well, yeah, I mean, he had been away from the group when that massacre happened, and so when he came back, then they were all gone, and the massacrers had left. So he escaped that. But the dogs are retreating, except of course Wilde is enjoying himself to the point where he just punches a tree and it falls on his own men. Yeah. And he decides it's up to him. So he suddenly grows much bigger into this kind of Bigfoot body with an extra huge mouth and 3 extra huge eyes kind of on the chest of this creature.
So this is a big kaiju yokai type monster. It's not clearly this isn't a human anymore at this stage. Mm-hmm. It's a strange creature, much like the Skeleton Knight or that other big bull creature that we've encountered, or Zod. What's Zod's full name?
Nosferatu Zod.
Nosferatu Zod. Yeah. How could I forget? I do want to point out that meanwhile Griffith has been like propped up in a cave, and much like last volume, I really love Griffith just staring at stuff. We just get shots of his face. We don't know what he's feeling or thinking. He's just watching everything, and I love that aspect. I love the handling of him that way in these chapters.
Well, and there is a scene where he tries to pick up a sword, but of course he's too damaged and he can't do it. Yeah,
he's too feeble to do it. Yeah. And the rest of the time we just see him watching things and not really being able to interpret what he's thinking about them. And it's a great narrative technique, I think. Yeah.
So now Wilde is huge, and he, Guts gets in some good shots, but then Wilde starts hitting out at him and nearly kills him. Can't kill him because he's the main character, but came close.
And he's alive in the present. Remember, that's the other
main
thing about Guts.
So then, as you were saying, Wilde grabs Casca, rips off her clothes, and he wants to rape her, although he says the bottom one won't quite work here. So something or other comes out of his big mouth.
Yeah.
That's what he's
It's using. A tentacle penis kind of thing that comes out of his mouth. It's really gross looking.
Yeah, it's all spiky.
It's all spiky and barbed, and it even has a... But anyway, so this is the point where he strips her in a convenient way, and Guts goes berserk again. And he stabs his knife through the penis tongue, the barbed penis tongue, cuts it off. Hilarious panel here where Wilde screams, "Not my," and then we get a bunch of singles, blank, blank, blank.
Yeah, like triangles and stuff that were just kind of bleeping it out.
Circle X triangle, which is your censored word that's too obscene to say. So we've shown, after all the things we've seen in this volume, he can't say dong or something. Like, what a weird... I don't know if this is a deliberate comedic choice, or...
Well, I wonder what it was in Japanese.
It would be that in Japanese.
It would be those same
It would have been
shapes.
The censored word in Japanese, yeah. So for some reason, Miura said this is too offensive to say this word, or it was supposed to be funny, that he was censoring this and not everything else.
Right. So Guts finally, apparently, kills Wilde. He's lying down. He's out. And then we get a scene of Charlotte with her nurse Anna, and Anna tells her that as far as she's heard, Griffith and the others are still safe. They haven't been captured, but she doesn't tell Charlotte that they're still being pursued by Wilde and his group. And Charlotte is still sure that Griffith is going to keep his promise and come back. and I guess be completely whole. And then she looks out a window and she sees Zod flying way overhead.
So again, it's not only Griffith and Guts that are seeing these things at this stage.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, I feel like Guts's comment was kind of like, and just about anybody saying, why do these things only happen to me when they don't only happen to you?
Yeah.
Just seems that way. And so the Hawks are patching themselves up after the battle. Casca is stitching up the wounds of Guts.
Oh, I want to say two things. First of all, was when I talked about that bull creature, was that Zod? Maybe I was.
Well, yeah, I should have. Well, one form of Zod who we see later, with the horns, but Zod has like two different forms.
Right. Okay, I forgot about that. I want to comment about the stitching scene. Roger Ebert used to write about this cliche. I don't remember what he called it, but it's when a tough guy gets shot a bunch of times, and then when the heroine is stitching him up, he winces in pain. And Guts really cries out in pain when she's stitching him up. After all the things he's been through in that fight,
he should have been bawling out in the woods there.
He never made a noise. He never made a noise during that huge fight with Wild as a giant creature that almost killed him. And here he's like shrieking in pain because she's stitching him. It's such an 80s movie cliche. It was really kind of bizarre.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think I don't know, is it just like the sensitive hero is kind of an irony because he did take all that beating and now a needle has him shrieking in pain?
Yeah. Strange.
Coming up, the eclipse arrives. First, just a reminder that you can help this podcast by making your Amazon purchases via deconstructingcomics.com/Amazon and make that your bookmark for future purchases. Deconstructing Comics earns a bit of money from your purchase that helps us keep the show going. We really appreciate your support.
Do you like comics? The 1960s? How about middle-aged gay couples gossiping about their neighbors? Then you'll love Checkered Past.
A loving examination of DC's Go-Go Check branded comic magazines published from February 1966 to August 1967.
I'm Dr. Bob.
And I'm Dr. Husband.
And each week we'll be your hosts on a trippy tour through mid-century four-color madness. Checkered Past. Available wherever fine podcasts are downloaded for free.
So Judo, I'm not sure I'm supposed to pronounce that. He tells Casca, as we already knew, that Griffith can't fight anymore because his tendons are cut. And they're talking about having to cross the border tonight and meet up with the rest of the Hawks. So the Hawks think it's post-battle, but Wild turns out not to be dead. And he revives and starts killing more of the Hawks. So as he's coming, Griffith indicates to Guts that he wants to wear armor, so Guts puts it on him. And Griffith is still wearing that hawk helmet that he's been wearing ever since prison.
Yes, but Guts has a line something like, you're wearing this mask in place of a helmet, but I thought it was his own hawk.
Yeah, I think we saw him wear that in battle in the past. Yeah.
It's a bit of a, I don't know, maybe himself got it mixed up.
Yeah, I'm not completely sure why he keeps wearing. I mean, is it his? I don't think his face is that disfigured, is it?
I don't know. I think we do see the. Do we see the face later?
I'm not sure, but anyway. So Wild is saying, "I don't want to die," and he finds where Guts and Griffith are, smashes the wagon that they're in. And he says, if I wind up dead here, I'll be inside that vortex forever.
Yeah. Do we know what that means? Is that explained clearly later on? It was a confusing line to me.
Well, as a matter of fact, I mean, it does come back, but also, so when I finished Volume 12, I went back and read all the pre-flashback stuff.
Okay.
The first 2.5 volumes, and I'll talk about that more later. But I'd forgotten. Do you remember that Count?
Yeah.
He had kind of turned into a demon. He had a Behelit,
Yeah.
And the God Hand appeared. That was when we first saw them. And he couldn't bring himself to sacrifice his daughter in order to get everything he wanted. So he got swept away in the vortex. So we saw the vortex back then, but it's been such a long time ago.
Yeah.
Volume 3.
There's a few moments like that in this volume, especially that were in 11 and 12 that were callbacks to volume that should have reminded us of stuff in volumes 1, 2, and 3 that were hard to remember at this stage for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, that was why I read those first 2.5 volumes, and they made a lot more sense now. They kind of filled in some gaps for me. So Wilde has picked up Griffith and wants him to use the Behelit to call the God Hand. But of course, Griffith has lost the Behelit when he was in prison, and everyone's looking concerned because Wilde has torn off Griffith's clothes to show everyone how broken he is. That it's too late to be concerned, and only that small rescue party knew what bad shape Griffith was in. The rest of the Hawks thought, oh, he's going to come back and everything will be back to normal. So this is news to them.
Okay, so I do want to point out that when Wilde was hired by the king, he was having sex with that room full of women.
Mm-hmm.
And he said something like, when the messenger came in and said, you have a job, you need to go find this guy. Wilde said, well, I have something else I have to do today. And then the messenger said, well, you have to catch this guy Griffith. And Wilde says, oh, that's my job today. So that's a job I already had to do. So it's all related to this eclipse stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I did also, like, there's so many details jammed in here, very difficult for the translator, in the dialogue, jammed into the dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a line here where when Wilde is holding Griffith, and Zod shows up, and Zod is complaining about it, and he says, and then Wilde, I think, says, is this on their orders? No, that can't be. Do what thou wilt. That's the only commandment for us apostles. So that means Zod and Wilde are apostles.
Mm-hmm.
And we didn't really know what that meant in volumes 1, 2, and 3. Now we're getting an explanation that's kind of like servants of the God Hand or something, like lieutenants, the next level down, or something like that.
Yeah.
Some kind of supernatural creatures, like maybe that Cobra thing was as well, and that thing which ate most of the Hawks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Before Zod shows up, Wilde realizes that the Behelit is not around Griffith's neck, and he's really upset about it. But then, Zod comes in. It's the horned version of Zod, and he impales Wilde on his horns. And Wilde is pleading with him, and he refers to Griffith as the fifth one, and nobody knows what that means.
Yeah.
And we do because we remember Volume 3.
Yeah.
But
it's finally building up. I was excited.
Yeah.
It's like, here it comes.
Mm-hmm.
It was like, I don't know if I mentioned this before, but it's like when Anakin turns to Darth Vader in Revenge of the Sith. It's like you're waiting for this moment to come, and it's finally almost there. Yeah.
And Zod says to Griffith, it will return to your hand because that's how it is.
Yeah, what does that mean?
Well, of course, he's talking about the Behelit.
Oh, yes, that's right. That's right. Yes.
But that's how it is. That's kind of the puzzling part to me. It's just Shogun
Yes, I actually think that's how it is, and fate and destiny are all a big theme in Volume 12. I think it's not an effective use of destiny and fate, but it is what it is. So, yeah, I think that when he says that's what it is, that's what he means by that. It's just fate, destiny. It's Griffith is destined to have the Behelit and be turned into one of the God Hand.
Yeah.
I do love here when they finally killed Wilde for good. He's this little old man, like a shriveled old man.
Yeah,
it's a really cool moment.
Zod tears him in half, and then he disappears into the vortex, and the body of this little old man is all that's left. So that's what he was before he got a Behelit, I assume.
Yeah, I think so.
And as Zod's leaving, Guts shouts out to him, because he's been thinking about what Zod said before about the death you can't escape. is coming, and
on the eclipse. Yeah,
Guts asks him about that, and Dodd just says, "You will understand soon." Yeah, you will understand in volume 12.
Yeah, yeah.
So now it's volume 12.
Yeah.
And the Hawks are all in shock now after they've learned what bad shape Griffith is in.
By the way, the cover is a bit confusing until you get into the volume, I guess, but really looks like an abstract thing, but it looks like, I think it's Griffith kind of hatching into God Hand form out of a behelit, maybe, or like a giant behelit or something like that. Yeah, interesting.
Griffith? Well, yeah, maybe it's something is hatching out of a behelit.
I think once you get, because it looks like it's his hawk mask turned to the side and like big bat wings that are wrapped around him.
Well, it would make sense. Yeah. Yeah. So everybody's in shock who didn't already know about Griffith's condition.
Yeah.
And so then they're talking about, we break up? Judo is talking about starting a small band of thieves. He thinks they shouldn't ask Casca to lead them because she's been through so much already. And he's kind of saying to Guts, you should take her with you.
Meanwhile, Griffith is silently watching all of this. And many more of those kind of sinister panels. Oh, by the way, another thing in this volume, they've changed the handling of the sound effects.
Yeah.
Which I mentioned last episode that Dark Horse handled sound effects in different ways. There was no consistent company line about it. And they've switched in this one. So now we actually get translations of the sound effects in added captions or in the gutters.
Yeah, that was weird. Casca says she would consider being the leader, but she wants time to think about it before they join up with the other unit, so she thinks. And they say, normally they would say, finish the battles you start, but you can't say such a thing to Griffith now, Casca says, because he's in bad shape. And she goes to change his bandages, and Griffith seems to want her to hold him. He kind of falls on top of her.
And she says, stop. Like, does it seem like he's trying to rape her or something? Or does she interpret it that way? It's strange, but he's trembling on top of her. And then
Yeah, it seemed like, it was kind of fuzzy, but I think he's jealous of Guts with Casca.
I got that impression, too, because they're kind of intimate. They're holding each other, and we just get one of those amazing panels of Griffith just watching them silently through the crack in the curtain of his tent. So I kind of felt like there was some jealousy going on. But then later it seems like he hears her talking about staying behind and not going off on her own, and that's what causes him to leap into action.
Right, yeah, she's saying, you have to leave without me, Guts, because I need to, Griffith is in such bad shape. Maybe it's her saying that he's in bad shape.
Yeah.
He wants to show that he's not in bad shape, and he starts up the horse-drawn wagon somehow. I'm not sure how he was able to do that, but he gets the wagon moving, and Guts goes after him. But Griffith's wagon hits a rock, and he goes flying out of the wagon.
Yeah. Maybe is it a little bit hard to believe that he could actually get up and... he's not successful in driving the carriage, but even to sit up there and whip the horses to get them moving seemed a bit far-fetched.
Right, and we didn't actually see it happening. We just saw the wagon started moving.
But it's Berserk, so maybe it's not that far.
Yeah, literally and figuratively. So then Griffith is kind of, I guess, unconscious, but he imagines himself married to Casca with a son called Guts.
Yeah, and the dog is named after one of the hawks.
Pippin.
Pippin, yeah. And they've got a shield on the wall. It's like got the hawk crest on it. I quite liked this chapter, this section, and when they come back to later, because last volume, or let's go back even further, I felt like this was going to be the story of ambition, as I've talked about on the podcast before. I thought we were going to learn about how a person becomes an Alexander the Great type that is a conqueror. What's the personality of that person? Why do they become that kind of person? And then in volumes 9 and 10, we got this scene where he's playing in an alley and he looks up at a castle and he's like, someday I'll have that castle. And I thought that was a disappointing explanation because it didn't explain anything. I was like, well, why didn't all the other kids in the alley look at that castle and also want to be conquerors? It didn't explain anything to me. And I love that we're kind of going a little bit deeper into that in this volume. But
yeah, that comes a little later.
Later on, when we come back to the castle again, it's explained that, it's just kind of fate that you're the one. But we'll talk about that when we get to it. I do like the conversation. I thought the conversation he has with himself in this sequence is really good, like where he's the battered Griffith is talking to the child Griffith who's running towards the castle. Was really good. I like the dream sequence. It really finally kind of opened up some of maybe what his future dream is, to have it settle down in a family that's like an alternate form of life. But there's an amazing moment in this dream sequence where she tries to feed him some soup, and in the spoon, this tiny behelit starts popping up. And then one of the best panels we have had in 12 volumes, maybe the best. A very confusing kind of panel of, looks like Griffith flying in the sky, but his hands and legs are faded away. And you're like, what is this? It's on page 61?
63.
63, yeah.
I see.
And,
just after the behelit and the spoon bit.
And we know that he's been thrown from the carriage at this point. And you realize on the next page that this is actually a reflection of the sky. He's floating on top of the water, and it's a reflection of the sky, and it's so great. I loved it.
Right, okay. Yeah, the clouds are a reflection. We're looking down, not up.
Yeah.
Okay. And yeah, he's lying in a small, like a pond.
Yeah.
And it has like bits of gnarled dead tree in it. And he starts laughing. And then, does he do this intentionally? Like stab himself with...
Yeah, I think he's considering killing himself, I think, in that moment.
Yeah, I see. Yeah, he's looking and he sees this wood sticking out of the water and he moves over toward it and jabs it through his neck.
Well, I think he tries and it goes off to the side. I think he's unable to stab himself. I think he's not strong enough, and it kind of, what's the word? It kind of, anyway, deflects off to the side of his neck instead of going through it. And he kind of just cuts himself a little bit.
Yeah. And then there in the water, he finds the behelit.
Yeah, but there's another amazing bit in this moment. Sometimes Miura is such a genius. Because he's cut himself in the neck, he's got this trail of blood that goes straight down his arm in a line. And that line leads right down to the behelit in the sequence. And, yeah. And it's just, again, it was the fate for him to find it. And the line of blood almost leads right to it. It's really cool. And then the chapter title of the chapter title page, the cover page of the next chapter, Eclipse, shows the same as the cover, but it's in black and white. And this is when I kind of understood more of what the image was, that it was him in almost fetal position.
Yeah, it's kind of clearer in black and white, the helmet bit.
Yeah. So then he's picked it up and he remembers what Zod said, which was, it will return to your hand because that's how it is.
Yeah, and Wild saying, use it, call them our guardian angels.
Yeah.
And he just sees the wind is blowing and he sees the clouds. And then we go to Guts in the wagon approaching Griffith and kind of blaming himself for all of this.
Yeah.
Casca is leading a bunch of the Hawks behind her and wishing that she'd been more careful so that Griffith wouldn't overhear what they were talking about.
Yeah.
And they and Guts are both approaching Griffith, and then the eclipse begins.
Yeah. Beautiful drawing of the full-page splash of the eclipse of the sun, the moon coming in front of the sun. It's all smoky. It looks like a 16th century woodcut. It's really cool. Really great. Just the use of the white space to represent the sun is, my God, it's genius. Some of the stuff. Yeah.
And the blood is dripping down Griffith's arm right onto the Behelit.
Yeah, that line. Yeah. It's so
and
good.
Griffith is, well, of course, he can't talk, but he wants Guts to stay away.
Yeah.
Then we see a bunch of like naked figures approaching as the eclipse is total.
Like zombie-like figures almost.
Right. And the Hawks are all like, who are those people? Are they in the Midland Army? No.
Yeah.
And Griffith is thinking, if you touch me now, to Guts, if you touch me now, if you put your hand on my shoulder now, I'll never again with you. Okay.
Yeah. So this is a problem of Japanese syntax where that could be the first part of the sentence and you don't know what the second half is. And we've had to render it English and it makes less sense. Like we don't know, because the verb would come last in Japanese. So we don't know what the thing they're never going to do together again is.
Yeah.
It's fine to break a sentence in Japanese that way. And it's just a struggle in English to render that. So we're stuck with this. We don't know what the verb is here.
Right, but Guts gets there, and he does have his hands on Griffith's shoulders.
Yes, and the Behelit mutates. The face changes.
Right.
Actually, the eyes and mouth and nose line up.
Right, and it starts crying blood. And we saw this back in Volume 3 also, the crying Behelit.
Oh, did we?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. It's kind of great, like, almost horror movie cliches, but I don't know why. It's really working for me. Because then we suddenly get this burst of energy comes out of it as well in the next page, and then we get the landscape turns into all these faces, like faces of souls, like the ground and the sky, everything. They're in this like realm or plane that's just entirely giant faces, just faces. Man, I dug all this stuff. Like, this to me was way better than wild raping and dismembering those people and carrying them around on sticks. This is, to me, the design of the horror stuff in here really works well, I feel.
Yeah. It's good. It kind of reminded me of Fullmetal Alchemist, since we deal with souls a lot there too. It's a little bit different, but I mean, we don't have this like landscape full of faces in Fullmetal.
I will say, H.R. Giger, I must have mentioned when we talked about Volume 1, one of the four God Hand has this kind of baby face that's a 100% ripoff of one of Giger's baby designs. And Giger did this thing with all these baby faces on a wall, like together. And that's a bit what this is like as well. I mean, he's stealing from the best. I don't have a problem.
Yeah, if you're going to steal from the best. The title page of the next chapter has Puck's lower half. Yeah. So.
His butt, a close-up of his butt. There's a lot of focus on his butt, as there was in the first 3 volumes. The thing I didn't like about this chapter was they're hiding this fairy behind, like, curtains and stuff, and you never see its face. Like, come on, we know. We know it's Puck. Why are we trying to hide this for 10 pages before he finally announces himself?
Right. So the beginning of this chapter, we see that the boy who survived the other massacre of the Hawks, and he's been writing with this theater troupe.
Oh, that's who it is. Okay.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
And he's going to find the surviving Hawks.
Okay.
And so he's caught a ride with this theater troupe up to the border. So, yeah, Puck is watching from one of the wagons. And so kind of confusing here because Puck appears to be full-sized in silhouette, not tiny. Is that like a trick of the light? Or
yeah, we had trouble figuring out his size in Volume 1, too. The way, I don't know. Yeah, it doesn't make sense. He does look full-size, but we had that problem in Volume 1 as well, where there was one panel where he looked full-size, and then later he turned out to be a tiny little bug-sized, like dragonfly-sized creature.
Maybe it'll be explained more in the future after the flashback is done. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe. But there's a fortune teller traveling with them.
Talking to a fortune teller, and the fortune teller is looking for this boy's future in the crystal ball and sees an evil omen. An incredible calamity is about to occur. The stars have gathered on that boy's path. A huge number of evil stars with a giant white star at their core, as if they swirl about it.
I do like this little insert with the traveling troupe and the fortune teller is actually a good pacing mechanism to kind of space out the arrival of that landscape of faces and then actually seeing what happens there.
Mm-hmm. Puck is saying maybe we should keep him from leaving, and the fortune teller says it's against my principles to interfere, and in fact we just can't. Everything is how it is.
Yeah, so here we go again. That's a theme again. Things just have to play out the way they play out.
Yeah, and the boy has a large effect on this gathering. That he was here now is itself evidence of that. So the boy is going to have some effect in the next volume.
Okay. I forgot about that line. That's important, I guess. Yeah.
And so the boy is seeing the eclipse happening, and he's got a bad feeling that something has happened to everyone.
Yeah.
And we see the theater troupe out of their wagons looking at the eclipse, and now Puck is tiny and standing on the guy's head. Mm-hmm. And miraculously, nobody in the theater troupe dies. I was expecting somebody to get killed by some horrible criminal, but they're all fine.
Yeah. Yeah. Bit of a twist there for Miura.
What? They didn't die?
Yeah.
It wasn't violent and horrible? So we see this landscape again of faces, and the Hawks are all freaking out. Yeah, there's several pages of freaking out, and Casca is yelling at everybody to shut up, keep cool, stay in formation.
Why? Why keep cool? This is craziness happening. But then some of those walking corpses start talking about the advent of the four guardian angels, and then we get a really tour de force sequence where out of the landscape of faces, some beings start to emerge, and it's very long. We get pages and pages of this. It's really great. Of all the
going into the next chapter,
four God hand rising up out of the faces, and each forming in different ways. They form into the God hand we know from volume 3. Really great sequence. Loved it.
Yeah, starting with the shapely naked woman, of course.
Yeah, but I was like, oh, come on, what's this? But then when it started to form into her, I was like, okay, this is cool. And actually, drawing somebody floating up out of that weird landscape is probably easy to do in animation, very difficult to do in cartooning. To draw it with pen and ink, and to sequence that in a way that's really atmospheric and effective. And he really pulls it off. So I was like, fine, have your boobs. I don't care. This is great stuff.
Right. So all the God Hand appear. And so as I mentioned, I was looking up their names because I don't think any of their names appear in this volume.
Yeah, I don't think were they named in one?
When they appeared in volume 3, I don't even recall that any of their names were given then. So the kind of leader, the skull brain guy, his name is Void.
Okay.
And he welcomes everyone to the feast, and he addresses Griffith and says, "The honorable child consecrated by the laws of causality, the Hawk."
Yeah.
So more of that highfalutin language, but don't worry, the other characters can't make sense of it either.
Yeah. Yeah. That line, I read that line, I'm going to say 10 times. I probably lingered on that panel for a couple of minutes, and I tried to parse the sentence. The honorable child consecrated by the laws of causality. So that means if you were to make an active voice instead of passive, it means the laws of causality consecrated this honorable, you who are an honorable child. I was like, what is going on here? Finally, I gave up and turned the page.
But I'm not quite sure what the laws of causality are. But
well, I think the laws of causality are fate and destiny, because it does come up again and again in this volume. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
it's all about destiny, because what we learn is that the reason the God Hand tells Griffith some people by nature are keys, and Griffith himself says they address him. They say, "Why do you want to conquer the castle? Why not just gaze at the castle?" In the sense what his friends in the alley did, and Griffith's answer is, "I don't know why." So this is the whole thing that, for me personally, as a reader, I was like, well, when are we getting the explanation of why he wants to be a conqueror? And his answer is, I don't know why. And the God Hand says some people by nature are keys, and he's a child of the laws of causality. The point is, it was just his fate. It was his fate.
Right, that's just
not
how it
anybody
is.
else. But yeah, by nature, you're the one that's going to want to be Alexander the Great, not anybody else. It's just going to be somebody. It's going to be you, and you don't know why. It's the nature of things. It is destiny.
Yeah. So a little before that, Guts challenges the God Hand. He says, "Enough of your stupid crap."
Yeah, what a line. Enough of your stupid...
And the God Hand says, "Such beautiful friendship. I'm sure you will make it for an excellent sacrifice." By the way, her name is...
I wanted to say she looks like that character from that video game that I can't remember. And the guy, the Lord, Void, looks like one of the Mars Attacks Martians.
Yeah, he does. Her name is Slan, or Slan, and S-L-A-N. Yeah, so she says that, mentions sacrifice. And then, of course, everybody's freaking out. Sacrifice? What? The round-head sunglasses guy is Ubik. And he says to Griffith, "From the moment you took possession of that crimson behelit, you had the qualities to become a demon. No, perhaps I should say that because you had those qualities, it fell into your hands."
Yeah. By the way, so we learn here that there are two types of behelits.
Yeah.
There are regular behelits which create apostles. Which are all these naked monsters that are walking around, and Wild as well, and Nosferatu-Zod.
Yeah, I guess Wild was scheduled to show up here, and then now he's dead, so he didn't appear.
Yes, but he is an apostle that used the behelit to obtain their proper form, is the quotation we're given. And then there are crimson behelits, and crimson behelits create God Hand members, so there's presumably only 5 out there, or 1 at a time, or something like that.
Yeah, so far as we know, only 5.
Yeah.
I didn't write who says it in my notes, but they say, "Bring the child to the altar." And the land that Guts and Griffith are on suddenly becomes an altar. It becomes much higher, and they're hanging off the edge of it. And somehow Griffith is hanging on, and Guts holds on to his hand briefly, but slips off. And of course, the whole surface of this altar is these faces. And Griffith,
and it's a giant hand, right? The altar, when we pull back, it's revealed to be a giant hand. Yeah,
right. And Guts is trying to climb back up with his knife, and when he sticks the knife in, then the faces bleed.
Yeah, and he does that dragging fall. I feel like we've seen that many times, all the way back to like Errol Flynn, like stabbing a knife in the flag of the sail of the ship, or something like that to slow his speed. But this time it's all these bleeding faces. He cuts down this wall of face. It's pretty amazing, actually, as a visual. I was like, oh, here's another cliche, but yet he pulls it off in such an amazing way in this that I really quite dug it. Yeah.
So yeah, when Guts looks up, he sees that giant hand that the 4 members are on, like the fingers, and Griffith is on the palm.
Yeah, so the God Hand is literally like the fingers of a hand, of God's hand. Yeah, yeah.
And Ubik says, "Let's return once to the foundation of your past. Then you shall know what it is you are." And so, we see Griffith as a boy trying to go up to the castle, and this is said to be not an illusion, but the reality within your conscious realm.
Never quite clear about that, because it's not real. It's reality of his mind.
How he really feels, I guess.
I guess.
But in this vision, he's a child, and he sees this old lady at a spinning wheel. And he asks directions from her to get to the castle. And she says, "Go that way," and he does. And then he realizes he's standing on dead bodies. And he thinks the lady lied to him. But she says it's the only route to the castle. And she says, I suppose those who wish to reach the castle must trample over people who have fallen here. Otherwise, all that will happen is you will end up as one of them. Yeah. So there's this whole idea here that the way for him to get there is for as many people as possible to die in his service.
Well, specifically the death of his own troops and the people that those troops kill.
Right.
All those lives. And the first living person he encounters here is that little boy with the soldier doll, the toy soldier that we saw in an earlier volume, which I was kind of like, this is ridiculous. Why is this little kid on the battlefield? And it is ridiculous still, but now it has, at least we see thematically that it kind of had a point. Miura had a point with including this kid in here with the little doll, that he would be on a battlefield. Well, it kind of, really drills home the symbolism of it, or the importance that he's killing all these people. But then the really key thing here is that Griffith is like, he's like, I can't do it. I won't go over all these dead to get what I want. And then finally, he's convinced, talking to this woman, effectively talking to himself, yeah, actually I do want this, and I will go over these bodies to reach the castle. So we will sacrifice all of these people to reach the ultimate goal, which is even beyond just conquering the human realm at this stage. Is like becoming a godhand, like one of the godhand, a super powerful being.
Yeah, and
something beyond that.
The woman saying, is kind of scolding him. He's the one who did all this to them, to these people who died, and if he never said he was going to the castle, none of this would have happened.
Yeah.
And these people all died for you, so you owe it to them to keep going, but you have to pile up many, many more corpses to get there.
Yeah.
And if you turn back, you'll become one of the corpses. And in this vision, then his arms and legs are all torn up, and obviously that's his prison injuries.
Yeah.
Oh, and Guts appears in the dream, and he says, "Ain't this part of the path to your dream? You believe that, don't you?" But now that old woman, now we see it's Ubik piggybacking on another Godhead member, Conrad, and Ubik is wearing an old lady mask. So it's a bit of a comic moment here.
Bizarre image, really bizarre image.
But yeah, Griffith says, it's no good to regret it now. It's too late to apologize to the dead. So yeah, I got to keep going. And Ubik says, yes, that is you.
Yes, and then one of the Godhand tells him a bit later on, bury everything in exchange for the past in the ruins of your dream. Don't know what that means. Don't know. And I looked, this is another page I read 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 times trying to parse this sentence. But I'll bet you this is exactly what it says in Japanese. And I have a hunch that Miura was just trying to write stuff that sounded cool. Maybe a little bit mystical or cryptic. And maybe himself didn't really think too much about what it literally meant. I have to believe that because it just makes no sense.
And so since he can't speak, now that count back in volume 3, he was supposed to say, I sacrifice, and sacrifice his daughter and move up to whatever he wanted. But and he sees that Guts is the only one who made him forget his dream.
Yeah.
And as he's thinking that, you see a smaller balloon that just says "Crifice." So we don't get the I sa. It's kind of, it's happening in the background kind of while he's thinking this. And the fingers of the giant hand close around Griffith. Yeah. And we see the symbol in the sky. It's the same one we saw on Guts's neck in the early chapters.
Yes.
And it's,
by the way,
it's the mark of being sacrificed.
Yes, if I can add a little side note, Jordan, who is a co-host on this podcast sometimes, and also my co-host on the comic book movie Oblivion podcast, learned, or I learned recently, that his brother has a tattoo of this. Yeah.
Wow, okay.
So apparently it's a big deal. Like, Berserk fans are all about this symbol. I guess they want to be sacrificed because they put this on themselves.
I guess so. But yeah, then we see it appear on Guts's neck here and on the other hawks.
Yeah, all the hawks are, they're marked by these kinds of beams of light. Really well drawn again. The use of the negative space, the white space, to draw these beams of light hitting them is awesome. And the shadows, like the handling of light in these panels where the light source is the laser that's hitting them is really cool.
Mm-hmm. And then all these demons start eating the hawks. So this is the eating that Wilde was talking about.
Yes.
That's the feast.
Yeah.
That's how they're sacrificed.
Yes. So did you read the next volume? Because I really want to know how Guts ends up surviving this.
I didn't.
Okay.
I managed to resist, but I think I'm going to read it very soon. Well, and when I was researching the God Hand member names, I accidentally read a really horrific spoiler for next volume.
Oh, no.
So I have to go ahead now, I think.
Yeah.
So let's see. So Griffith is now in kind of a fireball like he's in utero as the hawks are being sacrificed.
Yeah.
And
another great image. Yeah.
And Guts is not...
a little bit reminiscent of 2001, maybe, except for him being on fire.
Yeah. So he's kind of a star child, except in the worst possible way.
Yeah.
And Guts is not buying it. He still thinks that he can save Griffith. He's climbing up this altar to get to Griffith, saying, just wait, Griffith, I'm coming to save you. And that boy who survived the earlier massacre arrives as this is happening, and he sees just a big funnel cloud, big vortex, and within it are Zod and the skeleton general on horseback. And that's the end of the volume.
Yeah.
Okay, so what I noticed, and the spoiler made this even clearer to me, but Griffith and Wilde are not that different. And I think the whole Wilde bit is a foreshadowing of the eclipse, of what happens with Griffith in the eclipse.
Okay.
And they're both sacrificing their own men for their own gain. Mm-hmm. And like I said, that spoiler makes this even clearer. I'm not going to talk about that yet, but I hope I remember next time.
Okay.
So I think Miura intentionally put the Wilde story right before this. We've been building up to worse and worse villains, less and less ethical villains. Yeah. But I think the point is that Griffith is the worst villain of all.
Yeah.
Even worse than Wilde.
Yeah. Yeah. So I just want to say, as we wind up, I think Volume 12 was epic. I think it was a horror epic. I loved all the monster design kind of stuff in it, and all the things that I like the monsterishness of it more than gruesome violence in terms of horror. So I really did think it was really epic. But again, there's so many frustrating things in Berserk. I've been over all of them in these volumes. Some of it's like the dialogue, which is hard to parse. But he always, Miura always pulls me back and forth. Like, he always satisfies me just after he's dissatisfied me. So I forgive him. Yeah.
So I want to talk a little bit about my reading of the first 2.5 volumes.
Okay, yeah.
Because knowing, through volume 12 here, and then going back and seeing the really bitter Guts in the quote-unquote present, it's kind of sad now to see how, and now that we've seen, less bitter Guts in the flashback leading up to this, and then to see him so bitter, so that, all this emotions coming out of him, and Puck is overwhelmed by it. And Guts is saying things like, anyone who dies because they get caught up in someone else's fight is a small fry who doesn't have the strength to fight in the first place. And things like that. And those make so much more sense now.
Yeah. I did remember his bitterness. It's been in my mind the whole time.
Also,
and how we're going to get there.
I'd forgotten that in the present, he has a false arm made of iron.
Yes, that's right.
With a crossbow mounted on it.
Yeah, that's right. I forgot about that.
And he's come to be called the Black Swordsman.
Yeah.
So, that was all stuff that I'd kind of forgotten. Then I'm like, okay, well, so we still have yet to see him lose this forearm.
Yeah.
So, Yeah, so it pays off to read those first 2.5 volumes again and say, okay.
Yeah, no, that some of that stuff has been in the back of my mind, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, I found the Roger Ebert quote.
Oh.
It's from his little movie glossary, and it is, "A man will show no pain while taking the most ferocious beating, but will wince when a woman tries to clean his wounds."
Well, it's not the first time that Miura has referenced 80s American movies, right?
Yes.
You mentioned that very first chapter when Guts was having sex with that woman who turned into a demon.
Yeah, very Conan the Barbarian.
Yeah. Okay, well, I think we have to do the next 2 volumes very soon.
Okay. Okay. Sure.
Berserk is published by Dark Horse. Kumar is the co-host of the podcast Comic Book Movie Oblivion about relatively obscure movies based on comics. Thanks to our patrons for supporting Deconstructing Comics and our other podcasts. To join them, go to patreon.com/deconcomics. At deconstructingcomics.com, you can connect to us on X, Facebook, or YouTube, follow the link to shop at Amazon to support the show, and find links to subscribe to the podcast. You can comment on any episode on our site or drop us a line at mail@deconstructingcomics.com. And now you can also send us a voicemail. Find the Leave a Voicemail link on the left sidebar of our site. Are you making a comic? Send it to us and we'll do a Critiquing Comics episode about it. Our theme is by J.B. Anderton. Kumar and I plan to come back to Berserk in 2 weeks. But next week, we'll hear from Tessa Hulls, author of the graphic memoir Feeding Ghosts. It's about her Chinese grandmother's persecution by Chairman Mao's government, the mental illness that resulted, the effect that had on Tessa's mother, and then on Tessa herself. It's about Chinese history, trauma, psychology, family relationships, and more. I interview Tessa about the book and how she learned to make comics, and then Emmett joins me to review the book. That's next week. Till then, this is Tim, and thanks for listening to Deconstructing Comics.